Welcome to the Her Vibe is Pretty podcast, where you'll be guided on how to step up into your evolved woman,
design your dream life, and start living it. Let's get vibey. Hey guys, welcome back to this week's episode of Her Vibe is Pretty. I have been looking forward to today's episode for frickin' months because we are bringing on one of my best, I call her like one of my biz besties. She was an Instagram friend turned real life friend. She is like the ultimate boss babe. She's so beautiful on the inside and out. She's smart as can be. And her name is Aria. So she's known mostly for her former role as product manager at Uber, but she just recently joined Facebook to lead projects on Facebook apps, such as Instagram. I'm sure you guys have heard of it, as well as next generation devices. She is a serial entrepreneur, and she's been in all sorts of different business ventures, which I'm sure she'll tell you all about. She's worked as an online educator, a course creator, a mentor. She's an angel investor, and she's the owner of a popular mid-century vacation rental and photo shoot house in Joshua Tree. You guys need to see this freaking house that her and her husband put together. It is like out of a freaking magazine. It is so beautiful, so Insta-worthy, like unbelievable stuff that she does. And she's been featured as one of the 100 women founders in Databird Business Journal's new book called Founded by Women. So she's such a badass. I'm so excited to talk about all things business, negotiation, entrepreneurship with her. You are going to learn so much from this episode. So let's get to it. Yay, Aria. Welcome to the Her Vibe is Pretty podcast. We are so excited to have you here.
Yeah, we are.
I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be so fun.
Yes.
This is going to be great. We haven't had any guest like you before. Like, I feel like you are so different than all the other guests. And the topic that we're talking about today is so different than anything we've ever talked about before. So our listeners are hands down going to love it. And sneak peek for our listeners, we're talking a little bit about money and money mindset today. And our listeners are always asking us about that topic. So we are so grateful to have somebody like you here to speak on that because we know you've had so much experience and success in that area.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm glad that your listeners are asking about money. That's a great sign. I love when we start asking questions. That's when we learn. So I'm excited to share all the things that I've learned as we dive in.
Awesome. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about the friendship that Ari and I have built over the last couple of years is that we've always had a very open conversation when it comes to money things and women in business. And it's just one of those things that's not talked about enough.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely get into that a lot. So as we get started here, Aria, just tell us a little bit more about your background as an entrepreneur, as well as working from some huge tech companies like Facebook, Instagram. I mean, hello, that's where like most of us spend a lot of our time when we're on our phones. So just tell us more about your background.
Yeah, I would love to. So right now I'm a product manager at Facebook. I work on a variety of projects. One of the projects I lead is all about Instagram and captions for Instagram that I really love. I've worked at a bunch of different startups. I was a product manager at Uber during the high growth stage of the company in the San Francisco headquarters, which I absolutely loved. I also done my own startups and my own businesses, and some of them I still continue to do. Like, for example, I have a beautiful house in Joshua Tree that I love too, which is on Airbnb, and it's also a photo shoot house. I've done courses and coaching and mentorship for entrepreneurs and women in general. And recently, I also got into angel investing, which is a new adventure for me, which I'm really excited about. So I've done a little bit of everything. And I love that I've been both an entrepreneur and also been an entrepreneurial person in a company, because the nature of what I do in tech is very innovative. It's like building products from scratch. So it feels very similar to having your own business, but it's a little bit of a different structure.
So cool. So how did you get into all of this? Like, can you give us some of your background and how you got started?
Yeah, for sure. So I studied computer science in school, actually. So that's how I got started. My first job, I decided to join a startup. I actually said no to a really fancy offer from a very fancy company in the Bay Area. And I was like, I want to join a startup because I felt like that's where I would have learned the most. And so I spent some time there. Then Uber reached out to me, and it was at the time that a lot of people didn't know what Uber was. So it was like, are you joining a taxi company? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, we are building something legit that I'm really excited about.
You're working
And
for
so,
a taxi company.
and then things got crazy from there. Like every month we were expanding to a new country, and it was such a crazy but exciting time. Then, as I mentioned, I've also done my own business, just like being part of different startups. And recently, very, very recently, actually, I joined Facebook, which has been a learning curve, like starting a new job, but also been really exciting.
Amazing.
And I just want to add in here too, Aria designed and coded her own app. Like we missed that. You didn't even mention that at all. Like that was kind of when it was like right around the time when like I was starting to get into like my app development, and you and I were becoming friends on Instagram, and she was creating her own app from scratch, you guys. Like seriously,
cool.
such a business badass. I'm forever impressed by everything that you do, Aria.
Thanks. I appreciate you. To be fair, I had an incredible team that joined me later on, but the very first like versions of the app, I was like, let me just learn how to design. Shouldn't be that hard.
Oh,
So cool.
so incredible. So tell us a little bit more about working for Facebook and the project that you're doing with Instagram, and like what you're just loving most about that.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I lead a variety of different projects. I'm really grateful to be at this point in my career where my role is more senior, so I can take on more scope and be involved in a variety of different initiatives. So that's been really exciting. But the project that I feel the most proud of is the auto-generated captions that we have for Instagram. So I'm sure most of your listeners are very familiar with Instagram. So if you go to your Instagram story, for example, you can choose the caption sticker from your Instagram story and add auto-generated captions. And this work we do is primarily for accessibility reasons. So we do it more than anything for our deaf and hard of hearing community. And that's something that is just so fulfilling for me, that we know that we are making Instagram more accessible for more people. And we talk to a lot of our users and their experience. So that's been something that I'm really proud of, even though some of the other projects that I do maybe are a bit different, like in terms of the innovation, but this is the one that I like have the biggest smile when I'm talking about it, and it just lights me up.
Yeah, I got teared up just now hearing you talk about that. I love that feature, obviously, for that reason. Like, so something that Mary and I practice a lot and we talk to our listeners about a lot is practicing gratitude. And lately I've gotten a lot more in depth with my gratitude and more so like feeling into it. And something that I always go through my list with gratitude is my 5 senses, one of them being hearing. And it wasn't until recently that I've like really realized like how much of a gift it is to be able to hear. And I really started to realize that not everybody has that gift. And it just like broke my heart. I'm like, oh my gosh, like all along I've been, doing things on Instagram and like saying things and like inspiring people, but I'm leaving out this whole community of individuals who are deaf. And like, that breaks my heart. And it made me really sad to come to that realization. And it made me really, really grateful that you guys are taking steps in the direction of inclusivity and like including that community and giving us creators an easier way to like give that community the same thing that we're giving everybody else. Does that make sense?
Totally. And it's one of our biggest like motivations to also educate and inspire creators to use this more, and like even on your feed or IGTV, just like that user education for people to participate more in it is also really, really important for us.
Yeah. And it totally did educate me. I mean, when you guys dropped that feature, it just like set in even more that like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I should be doing this. And so now I mean, it's very rare that I ever post a story without those captions, even if they're small, even if they're little. And you know what, Aria, every single time I think about not putting those little captions on just because it doesn't match the aesthetic, I'm like, F that. Like, no, like I'm doing this, like not for me, not for my aesthetic, but for those who aren't going to be able to hear what I'm saying, but want to. And so I'm always trying to like put them on there somewhere. I just think it's such a beautiful gift that Instagram is giving the world. So thank you for being a part of that.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I 100% agree with what you're saying. It's not always about aesthetic, although we really try our best to make the features, complement your aesthetic.
They're
But
cute. They are cute.
You look good. Yeah.
some things are just for a different reason.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so beautiful. So cool. So are there any other projects that you've worked on at Facebook that you want to share? Or is that like your biggest one?
Yeah. So the thing is, a lot of things I work on, I can't share. That's part of what I do. So
I was like thinking, I'm like,
Give us the secret.
Instagram, tell us everything. Like,
give us the secret.
How do I get on the explore page? How do I get a viral reel? Like, what do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to?
Even with my parents, I'm like, I can't tell you. I'm so sorry, but I just can't. So I can only talk about things that are publicly available at this point.
Amazing.
How about this? Can you tell us, are there exciting things coming? Like things to get excited about?
Yes. For sure. Some of the things I read, I'm like, this is going to be good. So yeah, stay tuned.
One more comment before we move on. I just think so Mary and I, another thing that we talk about a lot on our show is when social media first came out, I feel like, well, both of us feel like it was kind of not a toxic vibe, but there was a lot of like, oh, Instagram and Facebook are bad for you because there's people complaining and you're comparing yourself. But Mary and I are very firm believers in the fact that these apps are a gift to the world if you let them be, if you use them with intention to inspire, to educate, to spread love, to connect with people around the world. Like we have listeners from all over the world because of Instagram and because of Facebook. And I just think it's so cool that you guys, I feel like the minds behind Facebook and Instagram right now are just like really making it so that these apps are used more with intention. You know what I mean? It's like, it's no longer just like an app to like share the best parts of your life. It's like, no, like let's educate, let's inspire, let's connect, let's be the change that this world needs right now. And we can do it through these apps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. I feel like mental health is so important. Integrity is so important. But at the same time, like if it wasn't for Instagram, Mary and I would have never met.
Right.
We live in different states. Like, how would we be able to like meet? Or even you and I, Sarah, like we have this connection now,
right?
Because I met Mary through Instagram, and now here we are recording this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So many things, so many great things in my life have come from just like finding like-minded people on social media.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that everything you guys are doing with like the captions and the reels and the filters and like all the fun, creative things and all the good things that you just hinted at that are coming are making it so that people can use it with more intention for spreading love, spreading light, learning. And I just think that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing that you guys are doing.
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Let's talk about money. Oh, I'm so excited to talk about money.
Money.
So our listeners know enough to know that the way that we're raised and the way that money is talked about in our upbringing and the way that our parents view money impacts our money stories later on in life. So what was your story with money growing up? And like, how did you feel about it then? What were you taught and how have things shifted for you now?
Yeah. So I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad was a physics teacher in high school. My mom was a freelance English teacher. And so I also was living in a small town. So I'm Persian. I grew up in Iran, and it was like a small town, very modest, simple life. And so we never struggled with money to the extent of like struggling to pay our bills, but money was something that I was very aware of, that we need to budget and be careful and all that. At the same time, my mom and dad are so inspiring. And to this day, I'm just so inspired by how they raised us, me and my two brothers. They had this abundance mindset always, where it was like, even though they weren't necessarily living that life, they knew that abundance was possible. So they would always tell me, you can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. They're like, there's no limit. And especially for my dad from his generation, like raising me and raising my two brothers, like he made sure that I knew that I was equal to my two brothers, that my dreams just mattered as much as their dreams, that my ambition was as important. And so I didn't grow up a ton thinking about my appearance or how I needed to behave around other people, or like quote unquote being a good girl or anything like that. It was more about what I wanted and the life I wanted to create. I remember I was 7 years old and I was like super like ambitious and crazy and different. I would go to my dad and be like, Dad, I want to move to New York when I grow up. And like, I ended up moving to California, not New York, but he would take me really seriously and be like, well, you need to apply for a visa. Like they took me very seriously. And that really helped me in terms of my confidence.
Mm-hmm.
But the culture around me didn't support who I was. So, and I think a lot of women, regardless of where they grew up, resonate with this, right? Like the messaging that you get from media, the messaging that you get out of school is not about raising ambitious women. Maybe it has changed in the past like 5 years or 10 years ago. And I'm so happy to see that change. But like for a lot of us in our generation, we didn't feel that. And so a lot of what I've done in my life has been trying to match my internal world with the external world that I live in, and like unlearning so many things that I learned growing up little by little and changing my external environment, because I always knew that I could have anything I want. I always knew that I can achieve whatever I want. And even if I go back now and like tell my 7 years old version that, hey, these are all the things that you've achieved, she wouldn't be surprised. She would be like, yes, I'm a badass. And that makes sense to me. But the external world was not supportive of it. So I remember like going to school and sharing my dreams and my teachers not being very supportive. And that was really, really hard. And that affected so many things, including what I envisioned for myself as my, as my financial goals, basically. And so I worked a lot to overcome so much of it. Now that I'm, an independent person and I can make my own decisions, still to this day, there are some messaging that I have to be like, no, we're not listening to that. We're thinking differently now.
Yeah.
That's
So when did you move to the United States?
I moved when I was 22 years old. So right after college.
Got it. Yeah. So something that, and I feel like maybe this plays a part a little bit, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it. So another thing that we talk about a lot is how our external reality is a direct reflection of what's happening internally. And internally, you were like a badass from such a young age, and you knew deep down that you could do anything that you wanted to do, right? And now look at you. Like that is reflecting in your external reality. And I'm sure that there were other children that you grew up around that probably didn't pursue their dreams because they didn't have that internal confidence. Would you agree?
100%. I always say abundance is, and we are talking about money. So in terms of money, abundance is not money in the bank. It's like what you think is possible for you, what you think is you're capable of. It's completely independent of your reality today. Yeah. It's all about what you think, because your future is being created right now. Like it's being co-created with your thoughts. And so you better be very careful with how you're thinking and how you view your world internally. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah, I love that so much. And that really resonates with me. I feel like becoming a mom, everything hits different these days. And hearing what you just said about the way that you were raised, the beliefs that your parents instilled in your mind, like I want to meet your parents and be like, help me raise my daughter to be just like Aria, because it's incredible. And you don't always hear that. A lot of times you hear the opposite, where the child shares their dreams and the parents are like, yeah, right. You probably can't do that. So I love that. I would love for you, if you're able to, dive a little bit deeper in how you got to where you are. Like what kind of strategies did you use to get that confidence, to get that reassurance, like in your mind, to have that money mindset that you have now and kind of had for most of your life, it sounds like.
Yeah, totally. So first of all, I want to say, I don't want anybody to listen to this and think, oh, so then you were different, so I can never be like you. Like you always knew who you were and what you wanted. So this is just not possible for me. I just want to emphasize that again, like you can change, and you can change your internal world and create an external world that matches that. And I always say to my friends, and I was having this conversation with one of my friends, like literally 2 days ago, that the past is the past. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are today or even the skills you have, because you can always build new skills. And for me, I also have had to learn so many things along the way, so many strategies, so many things that I've changed about myself. So it's not like, I haven't had struggles with managing money or just mindset around money, but I had to change that and learn new skills. So a few things I would share is, like, as I mentioned, changing your external environment. So I made a strategic decision to move to the Bay Area because I wanted to be surrounded with a lot of like-minded people who share the same type of values as me. And I love my community here. I love that I'm surrounded by so many hardworking, ambitious people who just have like crazy dreams. And so you feel very acceptable when you share your dreams with them. I have friends who have had very successful startups that have been acquired, and so they've done really well financially, or have positions in companies where they are with like very successful positions financially. And so seeing the abundance that they have created has been really inspiring for me. And so with me and my community here, it's very normalized to talk about money and talk about our goals here. So that's one thing. The other thing that I feel like it's not talked about often is increasing your market value. I feel like when it comes to money, we talk a lot about saving and budgeting, or even investing, which I'm so glad that people are now talking more about investing. But there's also that aspect of like building your resume or building your portfolio to be so unique at what you do, so more doors can be open for you. And I've always been really mindful of that. Like I mentioned earlier, I joined a startup as my first job and said no to a really fancy offer because I really cared about what the startup was building, but also I knew that that would give me an edge over a lot of other people because of the things that I was learning there. So I've always been very strategic about how can I make myself really, really unique. And this applies to everybody, even if you're an entrepreneur. Like, being an entrepreneur is amazing, but how can you be so unique in what your business offers? So that puts you in a different category in terms of your market value. So I think that's really important, learning that and paying attention to that, but also learning all the other skills. Investing is something that I'm very passionate about. Mary and I talk about this a lot. We talk about real estate investing. We talk about the stock market. I'm personally biased more towards investing in the stock market, even though I own real estate. I even had a workshop for this last year all about investing. There is so much data about women saving all of their money in their savings account for years and never investing. And it's just like, we need to change that. We need to learn how to grow the money that we've worked so hard for, and not just like put it in a savings account and hope for the best. So learning those skills is really important. And we have access to literally everything now, right? Like, if you have access to the internet, you have access to free information for months. So getting that education is really important too. And it's something that I always try to educate myself on. One of my friends visiting us, I live in Santa Cruz now, in Santa Cruz with his wife, and it was supposed to be like a low-key hangout for us, and it was, and we were laughing and joking and talking about like life, but we also spent a lot of time talking about Coinbase because that is normalized in our conversation. And I talked to him about real estate, and that's how I also learned too. Like, it's not just by formal education or like reading a book, it's just surrounding myself with people who are educated so we can talk about it all the time.
Yeah, that's so good. So do you have any specific resources for our listeners if they're like, okay, this makes sense, I have some money in my savings account, I want to start investing, like, where would you guide them to go? Do you have favorite books or favorite courses, or like where would you start?
Yeah, so my favorite is my very own course, to be fair, because even though I'm not offering it today, so it's not a plug, it's just because I made it so simple for everybody. I was like, let's just simplify this. So I like simplified, actionable advice. And I have a few books that I like, but For me, I'm more of a podcast / YouTube person. So I would literally just start like researching and like go down the rabbit hole of like watching more and more videos, because I also really like diverse information. I don't trust just one person and like go with their advice. I am like, let's hear from 20 different people, and then I make it personalized to me and my goals. So my recommendation is that more information is better, basically.
Yeah. So when is your course ever going to be open again? Like you can plug it.
I don't know. I really would love to, because when I had my course, it was just such a fulfilling experience. We had people from 12 different countries, and I was like, what's happening? This is so cool. So I definitely want to offer it again, but not at this very moment.
Okay, so everybody go follow Aria on Instagram. We'll link her Instagram and watch out for that course because that sounds awesome. When you open it, I'm joining. Like I'm 100% because it's something that my significant other and I are getting into real estate investing. He's already been investing in the stock markets, but that's something that I really want to learn about. And I know that a lot of others do as well. So I'll watch for it too.
And the way I designed this course, it was a 3 hours workshop live with me. So you would just come to this workshop on a Sunday and you would walk out with all the actionable things that you can do. And that's my favorite way to learn too, just in general. I'm like, just give me all the tips that I can start implementing today.
Right.
It's such a daunting thing. And I know that was my big hang up, and honestly still is in a lot of ways when it comes to investing in the stock market. Cause I'm a little bit opposite of you, Aria. I trust real estate so much more than I trust the stock market, but I'm learning to love the stock market a lot more. But it's a slow game for me because it can feel very overwhelming and intimidating. And it's like, where do I even begin? But I think the tip that I just want to like stress here, and you mentioned it, is like those YouTube wormholes. Like you can learn so much on YouTube. You guys, you can learn any skill you want.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to go to college. You don't need to pay for fancy trainings. You can learn so much from YouTube. And you just go down. It makes it so easy because guess what? As soon as you end a video, it recommends another one. Then it recommends another one. Then it shows you similar videos. And you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And before you know it, you are a freaking expert on whatever topic it is, whether it's investing in the stock market or like painting or
putting in a toilet, because you guys, I swear to God, Zach and I last night literally removed our entire toilet. I never would have thought in my life that I know how to put in a toilet. Hire me. I know exactly how to put in a toilet. I thought it was way harder than it was. We YouTubed it. We have a brand new toilet. It works like gold. Ran into some challenges, but our listeners know challenges are a catalyst for growth. We'll never make those mistakes.
Anything you need to learn. YouTube University. It's so real. There's no secret, you guys. Go on YouTube. You can learn so much. So that's such a good tip. But dang, I want to come to your 3-hour course too, because you should think about just redoing that.
For sure. I will think about it. And I also want to quickly go back to what Mary said, because Mary is a real estate queen, and she was very like in the most humble way telling me about her real estate portfolio. And I was like, what? How did I not know about this until this point? And why don't you talk about this more often?
I know. I should talk about it more than I do. It is like, I never mention it. Honestly, everyone listening now is probably like, whoa, what? Like, cause yoga is my thing. Like anything I publish publicly, all about yoga, all about just my personal life. But yeah, Jake and I have been in real estate since, oh gosh, I don't even know. I bought my first house in 2013 and have just been slowly adding as soon as I can. And it's one of the smartest decisions I've ever made. It was like, and it's hard. It's not an easy thing in the sense of like, you got to save your money, you got to get a down payment, but I guess that's hard in the sense of like, it's hard to save a ton of money for some people. It's very easy to just be like money in, money out, but I'm really good at saving. So I'd save those down payments up. And then as soon as I'd find a spot, boom, put it down, on to the next, and rinse and repeat, guys.
And that's a great example of what I was saying earlier in terms of like being unique in what you do, right? Because Mary, you've done that and you've created so much freedom for yourself to be able to do things differently in your other business, with your yoga business, because it gives you that flexibility. Like if you were so hung up on bills and expenses and you didn't have that other business, things might have looked differently for you. So being unique in what you do is, you know, you can do that in so many ways. And like what Mary has done is one way of doing that, which is so badass and really cool. And I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we should definitely do a whole episode on real estate investing.
Yes.
I think that's a really, I'd love to do that. And
Well,
yeah, lots to say, because it's a very, and that is the same thing. It can be a very intimidating industry to get into. And it's like, you just need to start taking action, but you want to take smart action because it's like, there's a lot of money on the line. But again, you can learn a lot online, and we've done a lot of that. Trust me. I have for sure Googled those toilet videos as well, Sarah.
Me too.
okay, Aria, I need to know how you feel and like what we're going to change the topic a little bit, but I want to hear your thoughts on imposter syndrome. And have you dealt with it? And if so, how'd you overcome it? Because I know that that was mentioned prior, and that's something that I've definitely dealt with in life. And I know a lot of our listeners have and still do. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Totally. I feel like there's this myth about imposter syndrome that maybe you deal with it when you're younger, and then you don't have to deal with it again because you get older and it just goes away. And that's just so not true. I realized that the more I've grown my career, the more I've got into bigger rooms and with people who feel more intimidating to me, the imposter syndrome, like the type of imposter syndrome that I have to deal with, will change and sometimes becomes even more difficult to deal with. So like I am at a point that a lot of times I'm in rooms where I'm the only woman, or I'm the youngest person, or I'm the less experienced one in terms of years of experience. And so the imposter syndrome that you feel there, it feels even more real, right? Because you have data to back it up why you don't belong. And so I'm a huge fan of constantly working on yourself, and trying to improve in whatever you can, in whatever way you can. And so whether it's like reading books or getting a coach or working with a therapist, like find ways to improve. For me, therapy has been huge. I love that I have an amazing therapist that I can always go to and be like, I feel like a very powerful, badass person, but today I did not show up like her. So what was going on for me? Can you help me figure it out? So I really like doing that. I've also struggled with people pleasing a lot in the past. I talk about it a lot on social media. I am a recovering people pleaser. So for years and years, I struggled with it so much, and it really affected my friendships and relationships and my relationship with myself. And I feel like with money that we're talking about, people pleasing and imposter syndrome can show up even more, especially for women of color, because if you haven't seen enough examples around you of success with money, it's normal to feel like an imposter sometimes, right? Like it's hard to not have enough examples and feel like the way you're thinking and the way you think things should be is okay. And the thing is also that if you are an ambitious person, you will always get pushback from people. And that can also play into your people pleasing, right? People will want to keep you small, and they will fight really hard for it. And they would tell you that you should be the way that it's comfortable to me. And I've definitely faced that a lot. Like people will misunderstand you and really try to discourage you. And you have to push back. You can't let them to tell you how you should be living your life. And if you're a people pleaser, it's going to be really hard to do that, because as a people pleaser, your primary job is to please everybody else. So we have to recover those patterns in order to be able to be the best version of ourselves. And that job is not always easy. It can get very, very messy and very painful. And sometimes I feel like when people talk about therapy, it's like this like sexy new thing to do, but it's like, it's a lot of hard work. Like I leave my therapy session sometimes and I feel so exhausted, but I know that it's really important work. So
yeah,
I continue to do it.
So would you say that through the challenges of facing the imposter syndrome and the people pleasing and the judgment from others, do you think that like you've grown a lot more into your highest self because of those challenges?
Oh yeah, 100%. I feel like I owe so much of what I've created in just the past 3 years of my life to recovering from people pleasing. Like once I recovered from people pleasing, like I had so much time and energy that I didn't have before. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not spending my time worrying about everybody else all the time. This is amazing. Let's go. Like, let's create the life of my dreams. And it's just such a beautiful thing to look at your past version and be proud of that person and be compassionate towards that person, but also realize that when you unlearn your patterns, like things can change for you like overnight. Like you have those moments when you're like, why am I doing this way? And then that's like your aha moment. And when you stop showing up in that way, you see immediately the impact that it has on your life.
Yeah. So beautiful. Our listeners, we tell them a lot that like the challenges are catalysts for your growth, because our whole intentions of this podcast is teaching our listeners step by step, kind of, and like giving them little pieces on how to become your highest best self. And a lot of the times it does get messy, and it's like, it's hard to feel in order to heal. Like it's hard to stop people pleasing, but that's just like so conditioned. So like, Aria, you are literally living proof for our listeners that if you allow yourself to let go of the conditioning, to let go of the patterns, to let go of everything you've been taught, only then are you able to fully step into who you are here to be.
100%. And if I can do it, everybody else can too, right? Like I was a person who would like leave a party and be like, did I upset that person? Like, what did I say? Like, what do they think of me? Like all of these people pleasing thoughts that kept me feeling exhausted all the time. And so if you're listening and you're like, that's me, like you can change too, because that's not how I operate now at all.
Girl, I loved everything you just said there. You guys, you might even want to rewind back and just re-listen to that section, because there were so many nuggets and such good advice. And what I really loved too was when you mentioned like, you have that aha moment where you're like, whoa, I didn't do it this time. I feel so much better, so much more aligned. It doesn't need to be that old way of thinking, that old way of acting. And it's like a new you. It literally becomes like a new version of yourself, a better, more aligned version.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. Thank you so much for all of that. So, okay, I'm going to like completely switch gears here. I want to talk more about money. And specifically, I want to talk about negotiating, because when Ari and I were talking one time, we started talking about negotiating. This is something I have close to zero experience with. And so I'm going to be over here like taking notes myself. But Aria is the freaking queen of negotiating. And she was talking to me, like we were talking about it. And I'm like, girl, we need to have you on our show. Like, this is people need to hear this. People need to talk about this. So I'm kind of going to just open the floor to let you take off with this, Aria, and talk to us about like the art of negotiation, especially as women who like, we need to use our voice. We need to own our worth. We need to stand up for what, our value. And you are so good at that. So can we just talk a little bit about your strategies, tips that you have, honestly, anything that you have to say about negotiation? Because when we were talking about it before, it was so inspiring to me. And it's just something that we need to be talking about more.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm just so thankful that Mary and I have this type of friendship where we can talk about anything and everything and feel so supported by each other. And I feel like, to your point, Mary, that like women need to talk more about negotiation and learn more about it. It's also so important to have people in your life who hype you up, right? Like I remember like there was this negotiation that I was doing, and I would call Mary and be like, I said that, and then they said that, and then I did that. And she was like, yes, that's amazing. Like, do more of that. And she would just hype me up. And it was just such a beautiful exchange of energy, because I also feel like sometimes people can feel that sense of, if this friend in my life is doing XYZ, now it's like, it's something being taken out of my life. And if you really value abundance and believe in that, it just doesn't work like that, right? So we have to be lifting each other up, because you're gaining back that energy to your own life. And I'm so grateful that we had that friendship. I love talking about negotiation with all of my friends, anybody who's like accepting a job offer, who's negotiating a deal, if they're an entrepreneur, if they're raising money for their startup, I'm like, come talk to me.
I wish I would have known you. So I just want to share a quick little story because, if you like can share anything to this, but like when I was working before I quit my job to start my own business, I tried so hard to negotiate my salary, and I wanted a bigger raise than what's like kind of expected in the norm. And I like for over an hour, it was like, I think I was in my meeting for like 2 hours, showing my worth, like explaining why I deserve this, like showing the value that I bring to the company. Like I went on, and I like really went to bat for myself. And it like, no, they just like did not do it. They would not budge. And I just like, I feel like that was the story for me, where I like told myself, like, I'm not good at this. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'm not even asking for that much money. Like, I can't believe that I have to like beg for this and like grovel for it. And like, it's almost making me feel worse. And so, yeah, when you're like telling me these things, it's like hyping me up. Cause I'm like, yes, someone did this and it worked. Like it works. But I like had that bad experience and it kind of just like threw me. And so, yeah, that's why I'm like, tell me everything you know, because I had such a bad experience with it.
Yeah. And I would love in a second, when we dive deep, I would love to like break this down in two categories. One is more of the internal change of mindset and things that you need to do, but also tactical stuff, like tactical things that you can do that are also super valuable. But with your experience, Mary, the thing about negotiation in general is that it's a numbers game, right? Like you might actually walk out of an experience and it can be a really bad experience. And it is what it is, because you don't always get what you want, but that's okay, because you can try it in another setting with another company or another brand if you're an entrepreneur, and just another client, and see what you can get out of that. It's more about like this change of mindset of like, I always negotiate when it's appropriate, rather than having one bad experience and saying it doesn't work. So like maybe actually you did all the right things and it still didn't work, and that's okay too. Yeah,
I love it.
But in terms of strategies, in terms of the first category of like the inner work that you need to do, I love to have a really deep sense of what I bring to the table. So let's say in a job offer negotiation, like when you walk in to negotiate that job offer, you need to know what's that unique thing that you bring to the table that another candidate can't offer. And I feel like a lot of times people think, oh, I'm not experienced enough, I don't have enough years of experience. And not everything is about years of experience. Sometimes it's just about your unique skills. Sometimes it's about the depth of your experience rather than your years of experience. And I have definitely landed positions in my career where I have been way younger than anybody else who had that position, because I didn't go to negotiate that offer from a place of years of experience. I talked about all the things that I can do regardless of the years, but because of the other things that I have worked on that are related. So if today I ask you, what's that unique thing that you bring to the table? And you have to take a pause, whether you're landing a client or you're landing a job offer, and you have to be like, well, kind of, maybe, I think. Like, if you're doing that, stop doing that. Like, literally block an hour on your calendar and get really clear about who you are, what your value is, what you bring to the table, and lead with that. So that's number one tip, having a deep sense of self-awareness. The second one is putting yourself first. And this is what goes back to people pleasing, right? Because your job as somebody who is negotiating a job offer or like a salary is not to please the other person on the line. It's to put yourself first, because this is your opportunity to get what you deserve. And people expect you to negotiate. It's like they literally expect you to negotiate for a salary, for example, or a lot of brand deals. People expect you to negotiate. So when it's appropriate to negotiate, you have to take advantage of that, because otherwise you're leaving money on the table. So this is where that inner work shows up, right? Like if you have imposter syndrome, if you have people-pleasing patterns, it's going to be really hard for you to put yourself first. And that's why I think more than like even learning tactical stuff, it's like in a year from now, I want to change my job. So I better start working with a coach or a therapist, or start, reading all the books to change some of the patterns I have, because it's going to benefit me in all sorts of ways, but also now that we're talking about negotiation, with negotiation.
Yeah.
And I want you to show up as a powerful person on that phone call, on during that meeting, and be like, this is what I want. So it's not like, you know what, I was just thinking maybe, would it be like, I don't want you to show up like that. I want you to show up really confident that this is what I want, this is my goal, and how can you help me to get there? And the more, just going back to earlier conversation we had, the more you become unique in what you do, it's easier for you to also defend your case, right? So anytime I've negotiated, because I worked so hard to gain the skill sets that I have today, I have gone to that meeting with confidence of like, I'm so good at what I do and I'm so rare to find. So you better try to make me happy, because if I walk away from this offer, it's going to be really hard for you to replace that. And it's not a thing that I just say to say it. I truly believe in that, because that's how I curated my experiences. And so really gaining those skill sets is really important too, because then you can show up really confident. But there's also a lot of tactical stuff that I feel like, even if you really believe in yourself, even if you know you're the best person to do the job, if you have overcame a lot of like patterns that you've had before, you can, because you struggle with the tactical stuff, you can leave money on the table because you just don't know how to navigate difficult conversations. And negotiation is awkward. It's hard. Like, you don't know what to say on the phone call. Right now, everything is virtual, so I'm just like referring to it as a phone call, but it's hard. And so the tactical things really help too. So first of all, I want to just like talk about a few things that I feel like people say all the time that is just not true. The first one is that if you're negotiating, then it means that you're not that interested in the role. Like, you can come across as someone who's like not that passionate about the role. And that's just not true, because this really comes back to communication. You can always specify how interested you are in something and you still can negotiate, right? So one of the things that I love to do is to say, this is the offer that I'm the most interested in, if it is, or this is one of the top 3 offers that I'm the most interested in. So if you can work with me to get to my range, to what I want, I'm happy to sign the offer immediately. And reassuring them that you're working together, right? Like, I'm interested, we are part of the same team. Let's work together and create what I like, so we can make this easier on both ends. So it's absolutely not true that if you negotiate, people think that you're not interested. It's also not true that if you negotiate, they will think that you're being aggressive. I feel like women think that a lot of times. Again, goes back to people pleasing. We feel like, oh, like, I don't want to come across as someone who's ungrateful or that I don't care about this job. And again, if negotiation is appropriate, which in the case of a job offer, it's always appropriate, you have to negotiate because they expect you to negotiate.
Yeah, I want to add something in here because, so again, same job. When I first got hired, I was leaving a terrible, terrible job. Like, I would have taken any job that was offered to me at this point. I just needed to get out of the job I was currently in because I hated it so much. And so they made an offer. I wanted more. What they offered me was the low end of the spectrum that they were advertising. And I was so scared to like raise any flags about anything that they would take this job away from me. I just took it. And then later, so again, took the job, just didn't negotiate at all. Later, when we were interviewing other people, we were discussing, well, what are we going to offer? And she goes, well, we're going to discuss the low thing and they'll ask us for more. We expect them to ask us for more and then we'll offer them more.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like, damn it. Like, she literally told me that. Told me that. And so it's so true, you guys. I mean, I've heard it. I experienced it and did not ask for more on the front end, and they were expecting me to. And again, left money on the table there. So
and the worst thing that can happen is that they can say no, right?
Right.
Like, you can ask and they can say no. They're not gonna like take back the offer. Like, in the case of like, let's say like you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're an influencer and you have a brand deal, you can ask for more money and they would say no. And you're like, okay, I tried, right? You can always ask. Like, nothing bad is gonna come out of clearly communicating a question positioning it well and asking it, and they can say no, which in most cases, it's not just like, no, it's not possible. Like when you negotiate, you can negotiate so many things. It doesn't even have to be your salary. It can be your position. It can be your work hours. It can be just benefits. It can be so many different things that you can negotiate about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other tip that I have a bunch of other tips. So can I share that?
Please
too?
keep sharing. I'm seriously over here like, okay, taking notes on all of this, because even though I'm not necessarily negotiating for a job raise, being an entrepreneur, I love that you said there are so many things that you negotiate in life. This isn't just for people who either have a career working for a company or people who are entrepreneurs. It applies to everything in your life. You're negotiating no matter what.
100%.
So
And
please
even
share everything.
yeah. And even like buying a house, right? Like when I was buying my
Right.
house with Josh Archery, I was like, I have some requests for you. So let's chat. So you can really use these as strategies everywhere. The other thing I wanted to mention is being prepared. Like if you need to have a script, if you need to take notes and just be really prepared for that conversation, feel free to do that. Being prepared is really, really important because you don't want to go there and like try to wing it, right? This is your opportunity. If you are negotiating about something that is like really important to you, you want to make sure that you're completely prepared. Like do your research, have the market data. And when you are in that conversation, be assertive, be confident, but also play it cool. I feel like sometimes people feel like when they're negotiating, they have to turn into this completely different character and talk differently and like just not be themselves or be aggressive or just feel like negotiation is an argument, because it's not an argument. It can actually be a very pleasant conversation. So every time I've negotiated, especially for job offers, it's always been a very pleasant conversation that has been very calm, very collected, because I don't think that you need to be different than who you are. I'm generally, when I'm talking, I'm very calm. I like to take my time, make sure that I hear the other person. So I lead with that same character when I'm negotiating. And I love to give them reassurance that I value their time and energy, right? Like if somebody is getting on a call with you and hearing about all the requests that you have, you should be appreciative of their time and energy. Reassure them that you care about this. Reassure them that you're working for the same goal. You're part of the same team. Because when they give you an offer and they go through all of these different steps, finally found you, they're really excited to close that deal. So working with them is the best to get what you want. One of the scripts that I like to use is to always start, like if I'm saying no to something that I've offered, I want more, saying that I'm really appreciative of your time. I'm really appreciative that you took the time to get me this new number. However, these are my top like 3 reasons why this is still not good enough for me. And just being very logical about it. And then ending with reassurance of like, but if you can get me anywhere close to my range, I'm happy to sign immediately. And so they know that this is not just like a game that you're playing. You really have a plan and you can really promise them something. The other thing, which I feel like this is so underrated, because every time I tell this to my friends, they're like, what? Was that possible? Is that you don't have to answer every single question. I feel like sometimes, especially with job offers, when you are on a call and they ask you something, whether it's like, are you happy with this number? Or this is the initial number that we can share with you. How do you feel about it? We feel like just because somebody has asked a question, we have to answer them. You don't have
this is taking me by shock as well, because I would answer anything anyone asked me.
Exactly. And that, I feel like that also goes to people pleasing, because I have this dialogue with my friends who are women all the time. And my friend would be like, I felt so uncomfortable when they asked that because I didn't know what to say. And I'm like, what did you say? And they're like, well, I said this. And I'm like, but you could just like not answer. So ways you cannot answer something is, let me think about this and call you back. Let me think about this and write you an email, because maybe it's easier for you to write back than having that conversation on a phone call or in person, because that can sometimes be intimidating. Or it can also be like, I just have to think more about this, without even, promising anything. Or you can just take a pause. There's nothing more beautiful than taking a pause on an already awkward conversation and just making it more awkward, because guess what? Somebody has eventually, have to speak. So if you don't say anything, they have to say something. So I remember I was on this negotiation call with somebody for a job offer. I actually ended up not accepting. And they said to me, this is the final number that we have. So what do you think? And I took a really long pause because I just genuinely was thinking about it, because I wasn't really happy with the number. And they ended up just like, because they got so uncomfortable. So they were like, well, actually, we can add this and we can do that for you, because they just wanted to close the deal. And I'm like, the most powerful thing I did on this call was just not speaking.
Yeah.
And that sometimes be really powerful, because you show so many different signs or lack of certainty when you don't speak. So don't ever feel like you have to say something that you're not comfortable with, or you just need to do more research on. I think that's a strategy that people don't think about enough.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's also good. And just remember, like, for those of you listening, it's in the discomfort that we grow always. So like, I would even invite you guys listening to make yourself uncomfortable more often, because we always grow from that. And it's always ends up being a win. And I think, Aria, you're really breaking through a lot of limiting beliefs too with all of this. One of them being, so something that you said sparked something in me. So my first business coach ever would always say to get potential clients on the phone. You can never make them an offer over text. You can never don't text them, don't email them, don't DM them. You got to get them on the phone. You got to. So that was so ingrained in my system. It was such a limiting belief that I had. And just recently, I was talking to a potential client, and I'm working with a one-on-one trauma coach right now. And she was like, it might be easier for your nervous system to text the offer. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. And I did. And guess what? No problem. She was like, all right, I'll pay you that. Yeah, sure. When can we start? And it's like, so I appreciate you sharing all of this, because I mean, what brought that up in me was when you said oh, you can take a pause and be like, you know what, I'll email you or I'll call you back. That, and then everything else you said, I think is breaking through so many of our listeners' limiting beliefs, such as another limiting belief of I have to go into these negotiation calls with a different attitude, a different personality. I have to be in my masculine and really get it out there. That's a limiting belief. Who says?
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing, right? I have to be in my masculine. I love that you said that, because you don't have to. And I am a very high masculine, but also really high feminine person, which has always been hard to explain to other people, because people sometimes can be like, no, pick one and tell me who you are. I can't handle both of them. And I'm just that way. And in my communication, I really like to be in my feminine energy. And so I don't feel like I have to go on a negotiation call and just act completely different from who I am. I love to build a personal relationship with that person and just come from a place of empathy. And that has always worked out for me really well. I remember I was on this negotiation call, and at the end, the recruiter, who was also a woman, when we just agreed on everything, she said, I'm so proud that you did that for all women, because you have to fight for your case. And I was telling her, yes, this is not even about the selfishness aspect of it. It's about the gap that we have in how much we pay women versus men, especially women of color. And I don't want to add to that. I want to solve that. And this is so important to me beyond my own financial goals. And she was resonating with that. And so we had that bonding moment at the end of it, which was so beautiful. It was also really interesting to me, Sarah, that you said email versus phone call, because I literally had the exact opposite experience where I had a coach, I had a mentor, and he was telling me that if you have to negotiate with somebody, you have to email them, because and you see people have just different biases. It doesn't even matter, right? So he was telling me you have to email them, because if you talk to them, they will corner you. They have better skills than you, and they will get an information out of you that you don't want to share. And I was like, okay, cool, sounds great. And then I ended up calling the person right after that. I just did what made sense to me and what felt authentic to me. And he was very surprised. And when we talked, I told him that it just didn't feel right to me. Like intuitively, I just felt like
Mm.
I'm good with phone calls, and I feel like this is the best way for me to navigate it. So at the end of the day, you better like just pick whatever works for you and like tune out the noise that you get from other people.
So beautiful. And I'm so glad that you shared that. Like, this is a perfect example for our listeners. We're always saying, like, listen to your intuition. My firm belief is your soul is the strategy. Like,
Yeah.
really, like, of course, there are things like everything you've shared, like, there are, strategies outside of your soul that like you can try on. And like, if it works, then great. But at the end of the day, it's your intuition, because the energy you're putting out is the energy you're going to get back. So like for me, for example, when I was like getting on these phone calls and trying to do it that way, and my soul was like, this sucks. This is hard. Like, we don't like this. My nervous system is on overload. My potential client felt that energy. So it was a lot harder to enroll people. But like when I'm in my flow, which it depends. Sometimes for me, it is a call, but like sometimes, like a couple weeks ago, it was a text, and like that energy is received. And like, that's what I love too about you talking about how when you're doing this kind of stuff, you're in your feminine energy, because you get the energy that you give out. So like, even if somebody identifies as a male, like we all have masculine and feminine energy in our bodies. This isn't something we've gone in really deep on the podcast yet, but eventually we will, because I think that's really important to like learn. And I think that's really cool how you can hone into both of your masculine and feminine. If we had another hour, I would totally go there with you, because I think that's something that's really hard for people to grasp, myself included sometimes. But anyway, I just feel like if you're in your feminine when you're negotiating, like you're going to pull the feminine out of the person on the opposite end, and the conversation is going to go so much more smoothly, and like it'll be less awkward, and it'll just flow better than if two people were like in their masculine.
Yeah,
You know?
totally. And yeah, I would love to have another hour sometime just talk about feminine versus masculine. It's something that I just, it has taken me so much time to just really accept who I am and all parts of me, and like be okay to be misunderstood, especially because the type of job I do is just so much in my masculine all day, every day, that people can have that impression of me, but that's not all of me. So anyways, that can be a whole other conversation. But one last tactical thing that I want to share that is specific to people who are negotiating job offers, but it's something that I feel like it can help so many people in that situation, is that people sometimes think that they can't ask about a range from a recruiter, and that's not true. You can always ask, what's the salary range for this position that you're hiring me for? Because one of the fears that people have a lot of times with job offers is that recruiters will ask you, like, what number do you have in mind? And that can feel really intimidating for people to share. And they feel like they don't have that flexibility of also asking them, like, what's the range that they can be offered? And this is something that I learned recently myself, which was really eye-opening for me, that in so many states in the United States, California being one of them, by law, they have to tell you the range for that position that they're hiring you for. So that's a really good data point to have, especially because it can give you a sense of how much more you can possibly negotiate for that specific level. And I would also add to that, when you share that, like when you ask that question and they share a number with you, they might ask you, okay, this is the number. How do you feel about it? Is it good? Is it bad? Right? Like naturally, this is probably the follow-up question for them. And again, going back to, you don't have to always answer questions. You don't have to share with them how you feel, because maybe actually you don't know how to feel. Maybe you have to like think about it and feel, like think about all the different aspects of it before you can feel something about it. And going again back to also having a script, my script in this situation is always, thanks for sharing that. That's a good start, or that's good for me to know. This doesn't really give away any information, because I don't want to tell you how I feel right now. Like, it's not the best strategy for me to be completely upfront. So even when you are answering something, your answer doesn't have to be the answer to the exact question that they've asked. And as I'm sharing all of this, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I wish we didn't have to know all of these strategies, right? I wish we lived in a world that was more equal, where there was more transparency, so you didn't have to know all of these strategies. But in the meantime, in the reality that we live, my top priority is to make sure that as a woman, I'm fighting for equality, and also like being on this podcast, sharing it with everybody else, because I want to see more women master this so we can close that gap. But ultimately, the ideal world that I want to live in is a world that we don't have to worry about any of these things, because it's just so stupid sometimes when you think about it. It's like, let's just be equal and transparent. Like, is that too much to ask?
Right. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the change that you wish to see in the world, and that we wish to see in the world, and that the world needs. Like, we need people like you living your truth, speaking your truth, spreading this wisdom and knowledge in order to make any change. So just thank you from us, from the bottom of our hearts, for being that person in the world.
I appreciate that. That means so much to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm so grateful to not only have you as a friend, but to bring you on here and share you with all of our incredible listeners, because every time I leave a conversation with you, I feel so inspired and just so much more connected and like hopeful and excited. And that's the vibe that, you know, that we're trying to bring. So you do an incredible job. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we get off here? Any kind of like last big takeaway for the listeners?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, Mary, everything you said is just literally how I feel about our relationship too. So if anything, I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to this episode to seek out more genuine friendships, right? Friendships that fill you up, that like make you feel your authentic self, that you don't have to choose between spending time with that person or being completely yourself. And I feel like the relationship that Mary and I have is completely that. Like, I can get on a phone call with you, FaceTime you, and just tell you like all the crazy things that I'm thinking about, all the goals that I have, right? Even all the fears that I have, and feel like you're not going to judge me or you're not going to think less of me. And when you can show up completely as yourself in a friendship, like, you express so much of yourself that in return allows you to even become more of yourself. And that is something that I don't think we talk enough about. I feel like we talk a lot about romantic relationships and finding the right person and all that. But I feel like friendships to me have always been as important as having a romantic relationship. And it's like the foundation of my self-care almost. And I'm so grateful for this relationship that we have. And so for anybody who's listening, like, it's possible. Like, you don't have to even like live in the same place or come from the exact same background as somebody else to have a really great friendship. And Mary and I are an example of that, because we live in different places, very different lives, but we share so much of the same values that make our friendship work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I love that so much. We talk about that on the show a fair amount as well, the importance of having those true friendships, and those shift and change over time. But then when you do find those people that you truly connect with, on not just that you like that person, but like you guys have similar values and similar opinions, you don't judge one another, you get excited for one another and support. It's like, man, when you find friendships like that, hold them close, you guys, because they are so valuable and they just make life extra special. So
yeah. And there was this quote that I shared on Instagram a while ago. It's not by me, but it was a quote that really resonated. And it was like, surround yourself with women who will tell you over and over again to ask for more money. And I was like,
hell yeah.
Yes, that's what we need. Because like, you did that for me, Mary, right? Like, when I was like sharing my like recent negotiation with you, you were like hyping me up and you were like, yes, go for more, just do it. And you need that. You need people who will tell you that, yes, you deserve more, and go ask for more.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
That's the great note to end on.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, Aria, where can our listeners find you? Instagram?
Yes. So my Instagram handle is Aria, ARIAMSFAR. Or you can just go to Mary's profile and search for Aria.
Oh yeah, good idea.
There, we will definitely tag Aria in the show notes. You guys,
Yeah.
Please go follow her. Her page is so inspiring. It's how I got connected with her, and you guys are just going to freaking love her.
Yes.
So Aria, thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for all of the knowledge that you just brought to us and to all the listeners. And you guys can catch us here next week on our next episode of Her Vibe is Pretty.
Bye.